Over 20,000 Polish soldiers are guarding the Polish border with Belarus. 7 months have passed since Belarusian strongman Alexander Lukashenko attacked the European Union and NATO using hybrid warfare, and in this case in the form of thousands of illegal migrants. Nato Dispatches went to the closed border zone to report on the work of the soldiers who serve at these uneasy posts 24/7.
Welcome to Nato Dispatches with me, Nicholas Richardson, and today we're within the exclusion zone at the Polish-Belarus border, and behind me, the Polish Border Guard. They're taking us on a trip with the 18th Mechanized Division to the border to see exactly just how the Border Guard and the Army are defending Poland's border. Please join me as we take the trip.
The border between Poland and Belarus is 418 kilometers long. About 200 kilometers run along the Bug River. Illegal migrants instigated by Belarusian state services are trying to force their way across the water. Since September, the Polish army has been patrolling the border from land, water, and air. We'll take a look at what this daily work looks like.
And here we are. I'm touching the newly erected border fence. Eventually it'll be replaced by a rather sturdier structure. But this is what the border looks like, close up. The fence, the razor wire, the river, and Belarus. This is what is being defended, and this is what we're going to see more about in this program. I'm walking along the track that goes alongside the river and the border fence. Along this track, there are the joint patrols of the Border Force and the 18th Mechanized Division. They patrol on foot, they patrol on vehicles. You can see the river. They also patrol in boats. And, as we know, they have assets in the air. This is a big job, and they're doing it very well. And here we are at a post on the border. Not quite a border post, but a post on the border. Behind me, the river. Of course, on the one hand, it's a natural boundary which helps the patrols defend the Polish border. On the other, it is a method of crossing. Immigrants are using inflatable dinghies to get across. Occasionally, they wade across the river. And while we're here observing the border, on the other side of the border, the Belarusian forces are observing us. And they're looking for gaps in the defences so they can encourage immigrants to cross when the patrols are not here. It's a cat and mouse operation, but at this side of the border forces are determined to make sure they defend the border. As you can see, and today's a good example, the conditions on the border are not always easy. And that's why the soldiers have these little huts where they can get shelter, they can also observe. And if we're fortunate, we may see some soldiers returning from one of their patrols. And here they are, walking along the border, ever vigilant, ready to intervene if the need arises. Probably looking also for a few minutes of shelter from the wind and the rain, which actually it's quite chilly here today, and the shelter will be very welcome. Dzień dobry. Dzień dobry. Bardzo mi miło. May we have a look inside, Możemy? Thank you. Here we are in the hut, and of course, very welcome. You can see I'm touching the stove here. You've seen the wood outside. It's worth bearing in mind that the soldiers and the border guard patrolling do a 12-hour shift. So, particularly at night, particularly in cold weather, a warm hut for a few minutes rest is very, very welcome. And from the border, the eastern border of Poland, the eastern NATO border, it's over to Conrad in the studio for the latest news from NATO's headquarters.
Thanks, Nicholas. Well, it's certainly been a momentous week for NATO. On Monday, February 7th, President Andrzej Duda met European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen, European Council President Charles Michel, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in Brussels. The talks focused on security in the Central and Eastern European region in the context of the threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
To be deployed in Belarus, the largest military build-up there since the Cold War. These deployments are not justified.
We Poles are responsible members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is in our best interest to keep peace and to prevent escalation between Russia and NATO.
Tuesday, February 8th. Our common goal is to prevent a war in Europe. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said this alongside French President Emmanuel Macron and Polish President Andrzej Duda during their talks in the Weimar Triangle format in the German Chancellery.
The leaders of Germany, France and Poland discuss ways to de-escalate tensions over the Russian military build-up on the borders of Ukraine. Western countries, led by the United States, fear Russia is preparing to invade Ukraine. Moscow says it is planning no invasion but could take unspecified military technical measures unless a number of security demands are met, including a promise from NATO never to admit Ukraine as a member. The United States and the European Union have threatened Russia with sanctions if it attacks Ukraine. Moscow, still Europe's largest energy supplier, despite already being under sanctions since seizing Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014, has largely dismissed new sanctions as an empty threat. Polish President Andrzej Duda said this was the most difficult situation Europe has faced since 1989, a milestone in a year of momentous change in Europe, leading in a few short months to the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989 and the fall of the Iron Curtain dividing Eastern and Western Europe. In my opinion, this is the most difficult situation NATO and the European Union have faced since 1989, or at least the most difficult in which the Central Europe and Europe in general have found themselves since then. Since the beginning of the 1990s. We have to find a solution, and we need to find a solution that makes sure war is avoided. This is our most important objective at the moment. I believe we can achieve this, and I think the most important thing at the moment is that we work in unity and solidarity. We have to show that we speak with one voice, that we are in this together and that we cannot be broken. And I think we must also show that we will not back down. Our common goal is to prevent war in Europe. The massing of Russian troops on the Ukraine border is of great concern, and our appraisal of the situation is united, as is our position on this. Any further attack on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine is unacceptable and will draw wide-reaching consequences onto Russia, politically, economically and geostrategically. Our talks at exactly this time will be of great benefit, as we are all united behind one goal, to maintain peace in Europe through diplomacy, a clear message and the readiness to respond with one voice. Macron, who in contrast to the United States and British leaders, has played down the likelihood that Russia may soon invade its neighbour, shuttled from Moscow to Kiev on Tuesday in a high-profile bid to act as a mediator before flying to Berlin. The French president has no breakthroughs to announce. His office rode back on Tuesday after an official said overnight that Putin had promised him Russia would not stage military maneuvers near Ukraine for the time being.
Et nous allons continuer d'agir dans les semaines qui viennent.
We will continue to act in the coming weeks with simple objectives. The first one, it has been said, avoiding war. The peace and stability of the European continent are treasured by us, and we believe our duty is to do whatever is in our power to preserve it.
La deuxième chose, c'est...
The second thing is consolidating and defending the unity of Europeans and allies at all times. This is how we have prepared our deadlines, and that is how we are walking this path.
Wednesday, February 9th, the Yashonka Airport at the southeastern part of Rzeszów is a center of operations for U.S. soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division. They've arrived at short notice, officially to discourage Russia from attacking Ukraine. Their secondary goal is to support and coordinate the evacuation of Americans if Russia were to attack Ukraine and U.S. citizens were to flee the country.
Washington estimates that there are around 30,000 US citizens in Ukraine. President Joe Biden has repeatedly advised them to leave the country in recent times due to the threat of war, saying that if a Russian invasion begins, the authorities may not be able to help them evacuate. According to the Wall Street Journal, the same commanders who took part in the evacuation operation in Afghanistan are involved in the preparation for this mission. Soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division also participated in that operation. However, anonymous army officials quoted by the daily newspaper estimate that a rapid collapse of the Ukrainian authorities and troops, as happened in Afghanistan, is unlikely. The newspaper reports that the US representatives and military specialists believe that Russia would probably occupy selected parts of Ukraine and the invasion would last for a longer period. According to the Pentagon's assessment, a full-scale Russian invasion could trigger a wave of 1 to 5 million refugees from Ukraine. Meanwhile, soldiers are to start setting up temporary tent camps, checkpoints and other temporary installations on the Polish side of the border with Ukraine in the coming days to prepare for the arrival of Americans leaving Ukraine.
Thursday, February 10th, British troops landed in Warsaw as British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was visiting Poland as part of the push from NATO members to bolster the alliance's eastern flank. Speaking to Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, Johnson said the two countries would not accept bullying by Russia and that the West could face the most dangerous moment in its standoff.
We won't accept, Poland and the UK won't accept a world in which a powerful neighbour can bully or attack their neighbours. And we won't accept it because we believe all people, no matter where they are born, have a right to live safely and choose who governs them and to decide what organisations they aspire to have membership of, or indeed what bodies they want to cease being members of. And we will not compromise on that principle.
Great Britain showed great evidence of solidarity with Ukraine, with Poland, and with the entire eastern part of NATO. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you very much for sending troops.
For being so involved here and being so involved in the security of NATO's eastern flank. The political goal of Putin is to break up NATO, so we must show how coherent we are because we are coherent. We have a great understanding of the tensions on NATO's eastern flank.
Friday, February 11th, President Andrzej Duda and the allied leaders of the United States, UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Romania spoke during a conference call about the ongoing Russian military buildup at the Ukrainian border. The White House statement read that the leaders discussed shared concerns about Russia's continued buildup of military forces around Ukraine and continued coordination on both diplomacy and deterrence. There's absolute unity among the leaders of the West, a sense of deep solidarity with Ukraine and the need to help it financially and through arms supplies. There's no declaration of sending military forces to Ukraine, however. On the initiative of U.S. President Joe Biden, another teleconference was held with the leaders of several NATO countries, EU representatives, and the Secretary General of the alliance. The topic is the same as last time. We talk about it all the time, the problem of Russian aggression against Ukraine, the increasing Russian presence on the borders of Ukraine and Belarus. Well, it certainly was a busy week for NATO, but one could say that NATO has never been as united as it is now. Over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Conrad. Well, today we've had a very interesting programme. We've seen the border guard in action. We've visited the border itself. We've seen the conditions under which they operate. We've seen the border fence, and we know it's going to be replaced by a more permanent structure. Until then, we see how the men and women of this border guard and the 18th Mechanised Division are working hard to keep the Polish border safe. And as I said earlier, it's not just a Polish border, it's a border of NATO. And this is work they're doing on behalf of NATO and ultimately the European Union border as well.